As you all already know, Casey Anthony is now on Substack, right? But I went through Substack and I wanted to see what she has to say. And just like I said, she's throwing out trigger words like women's rights, like LGBTQ community, throwing out things like my daughter, I am going to advocate for myself and then my daughter, always putting herself first, right? Not her daughter. That's not her main concern. It wasn't during the 31 days she was missing because she knew exactly where she was and she didn't want to get caught. So we all know that she spent almost 4 years in prison because she was convicted on lying to the police. And we all know that her being found not guilty did not mean that she was not guilty. It doesn't mean that she's innocent either, right? Because in Florida, they had the first degree charges without any secondary or third charges that were attached. Okay, the jury could not definitively prove the premeditation part, right? So them coming back not guilty was not them saying that she's innocent. In fact, the jurors themselves have been very vocal about that.
Ford, she joins us from Florida this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And Jennifer, I read that you said you were sick to your stomach after reaching the verdict. Is that because you knew that Casey would go free even though she may have murdered her child?
I think it was more just not knowing whether you're setting someone free that murdered their child or we didn't know, so it was hard to know if we made the right decision.
So yes, I broke this the very moment I woke up early that morning and seen the post. And she didn't even have 5 followers yet. Now she's at like 61,000 on TikTok. That's so funny that TikTok allows people who committed atrocious, heinous crimes to be on their platform, but yet they want to sit here and say that it's low quality QR content or that it's harassment and bullying when you actually advocate for the victim of those people's crimes. That's really hilarious. That is so hilarious. They want to mass report and actually try to ban people's accounts. But you know what? That's never going to stop the true crime, anti-crime community from literally advocating for victims' rights. Because most of us are victims and survivors. So with that said, Casey Anthony, given her all benefit of a doubt, right? Yeah, it doesn't matter if you were presumed innocent. By the very Constitution that we all live under, the fact is there was enough forensic and circumstantial evidence to put you away for life. The problem is that the jury didn't have the first degree premeditated charges. It was that or nothing. There was no secondary or third charges, and they had a hard time deliberating the premeditation part because Jose Baez is great at poking holes, right? That reasonable doubt, all of it, and saying, but it could have been an accident, which doesn't go to premeditation. And it's fine. They did, what in Europe you see it all the time. There can be lots of evidence, lots of forensic evidence, even DNA. And DNA is something that is very questionable because DNA can be framed. We've seen things like that happen. Stephen Avery, Brandon Dassey, all of that. Totally different video, totally different subject. But we see things like that happen all the time, where forensic evidence can be a frame job. And it looks very damning in the court of law. It looks like things are that way. But like my dad always used to say, believe none of which thou hear and only half of which thou see. Because almost everything you hear is hearsay, and things that you see may not be as they appear. So the big question, Casey Anthony comes out of nowhere after dozens of years, it seems like, hiding under a rock and being private and spending 4 years in prison for actually lying to police and obstructing justice and all of that. Why would you obstruct justice if you're innocent? If the only thing you cared about was finding your daughter and wanting to know what happened to her, you would not have spent all that time lying and trying to negate your culpability because you knew that if her body was found, you're going to get found out. It didn't link to your dad. Your dad didn't face charges for anything. And you certainly weren't telling the police that it was my dad, it was my brother, it was my mom, these people. No. And you'd sit here and you talk on Substack about libel, about slander, about laws, about constitutional rights, basic human rights, civil rights, all of this, right? Law in Florida about threats, libel, and slander. Yet, what are you doing to your mom, dad, and brother? You think that you own your mom, your dad, and your brother, and that they are not entitled to the same exact rights that you are trying to hide behind? There's only one thing left to ever talk about anymore, Casey, and that is the truth of what really happened to Kaylee. And this is why I have never gotten into, I've told everybody, I've been very vocal about this for over 4.5 years. Since I started making content, since I started using my YouTube, since I started on TikTok in 2018, this is the one case that I've never really wanted to get into details. I never wanted to get into the semantics. I never wanted to get into the microanalysis because it's a very sensitive topic for any mother who has raised children. And Casey, you did not, the fact that you even get to sit here and claim that you raised your daughter, she was two. She was two. The thing that bothers me the most, it's like the same thing with Gypsy that bothers me the most, is the sole lack of accountability and responsibility. But it's the, rules for thee and not for me. Like the fact that you can sit here and hide behind civil, constitutional, and basic human rights in the LGBTQ community, which you are not a member of. I don't care if you claim to be an ally. Anybody can do that. But you don't get to hide behind a movement or behind a rights movement or behind anybody's community to try to negate, justify, reason, and if but away why you took the life of your daughter, whether you did it by accident or you did it intentionally. No 2-year-old baby should be dumped and then found 5 months later, all the way down to bone, with duct tape over her face. If anybody doubts it, go back and rewatch Casey's trial. Rewatch the phone calls between her parents and her while she's in jail. They're trying to get her to actually tell them anything, any little piece of information. Their sole purpose was to try to find their granddaughter. And she was giving them nothing but word salads. And she's still doing those word salads right now. In fact, she has a lot of word salads. She's going to go and say, slander this, you're slander that. And oh, you're a poor excuse of a mother. Even if you didn't, you're still a crappy mother who neglected her child, who her child ended up deceased. And good mothers don't end up with deceased children. She's going to get all smart ass down here and be like, you apostrophe RE for you are, a conjunction. No, you're, and you're. Like just like there, and there. Okay, grammar police, we're not micro-analyzing, getting into semantics and nitpicking, okay? All right, that's not what we're doing. A lot of people's phones accidentally autocorrect and change things based on voice texting and all of that. So grammatical errors are not always chalked up to somebody's intelligence level. And the fact that you're trying to insinuate that, okay, people are upset and they have every right to be. No one cares, Casey. No one is afraid of you. You're the only person that had your child, and you're the only person who ended up with a deceased child. So go away. You're not welcome here or on TikTok. I'm not afraid of you. Really? Is that why you hide behind a convent? And that's why you hide behind a nunnery? And that's why you hide behind a defense attorney for so long, Casey? Because you know somebody's going to beat your ASS? Let's see what the judge over her case has to say.
I think that she had used chloroform in the past to sedate or knock her daughter out so she could be quiet. And I think this time she gave her too much.
That's what the judge who presided over the Casey Anthony trial had to say. Even he believes she did it. And this is what I had to say in response to her. My daughter also. She's going to sit here and talk about legal rights, civil, constitutional, basic human rights, while she's still slandering her own father, mother, and brother. Why? Because her father testified that he knew his granddaughter and daughter were alive and they were together. 31 days later, he gets called about a car being dumped.